Welcome to the What Now podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Powers. Follow along as I figure out how to go from feeling lost and at a crossroads in my life to hopefully, eventually, being found. If you have ever felt like you needed a change or pivoting from your current experience is necessary, but you just don't know how, join me. Wanderers are always welcome. All right, everybody, welcome back to What Now, a podcast for the lost and found. This is your host, Amanda, and I am so stoked. We've got an absolutely epic episode ready for you today. Our guest this week is a podcast, TV, and radio sensation. She has interviewed people from all walks of life for over a decade, from Washington, D.C., all the way over to Los Angeles, California. She started her career on the wildly popular Kane Show on Hot 99.5. She is a longtime media personality and the current host of her very own podcast, The Fraser Show, which has over 11 million downloads. And she has welcomed guests from all walks of life, from the Real Housewives to a university economist and journalist, professional athletes, reality stars, professors. She is phenomenal and has lots of hot takes on pop culture, life, show recaps, and honestly, just how to live your life to the fullest. So everybody, please welcome Sarah Fraser.
Amanda, I love that intro, girl. All right, I'm feeling like, okay, now I'm very accomplished, much more than I think of on my day to day.
Oh no, you've done a lot, and I am truly honored to have you here. I think it's going to be great, and I think my guests could learn a lot from you. And you started in an industry that I've never touched before until relatively recently. So I think I could gain a lot of insights too. So selfishly, I'm glad that you're here because now I can take advantage of this.
I do the same. I'm always inviting people on that I'm curious about their occupation or what they do or how they built it. I love how they built it.
Yeah, how you built it and the truth behind it, right? Like what happens behind closed doors and what are you really dealing with and how did you overcome that kind of struggle or darkness or trauma and where did it lead you to who you are today? So I'm hoping to dive into that too with you a bit. But for my listeners who may not have had the pleasure of seeing some of your content so far or listening to your prior shows, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what your background is and kind of what you're doing in the media now?
Yes. So my career started in 2007 in Washington, D.C. as a morning radio host on Hot 99.5, The Kane Show, which became a syndicated radio show in Tampa, Florida, and Louisville, Kentucky, a bunch of markets across the country. And that gave me such a huge start in media. But I was also entering radio at really the tail end of radio. I mean, now I would imagine most of your listeners and yourself probably don't listen to radio anymore like we used to
No.
2 decades ago.
No, not like because that was your only option. Either you had the radio
Right.
or you had the tape cassette with the auxiliary cord that came out of it. So that way you could play the tape, but plug it into your phone and then get it to come out of your car speakers. Like I remember driving a car like that, or like when the CDs were in the back of the trunk and you had to put the 6 in the trunk and then you could listen to them and you'd have to press which CD number on the board. Anybody younger is going to be like, how old are they? What the hell? Who would drive a car like that? That's inconvenient. But that was our life.
The CD changer in the trunk was the ultimate. It was like it was just like you had made it. You were like driving a Mercedes if you had that. And like,
no, it wasn't my car. It was if my mom let me drive her car, then I could do that. Yeah, no.
So I was in radio for 9 years in DC. After I left the Kane Show, I did a year and a half stint on what was my own show, the Sarah, Ty, and Mel Show, which was on DC's 107.3, and the radio station's since been sold, and I think it's like a Christian rock station. But in radio, there's a saying, you haven't been in radio until you've been fired. So I think I've been fired from most of my radio jobs. And they were changing formats on 107.3, and they said, we want you to stay on. We're going to give you this midday show, and you could launch a podcast. Because I'd really been toying with this was 2015, 2016, about launching a podcast because we would go out to like morning show events and we'd ask young women, like, because that was our target audience, what are you listening to? And they would say, oh, this NPR podcast, I'm listening to this crime podcast. And I truly in that moment knew this is the kiss of death to our industry. If these women who are working women that are commuting every day for an hour, if they're no longer tuning in to morning radio, we are cooked. So I took my severance package, and in 2016, I started my own podcast, and it was brutal. The first 3 years were I lost money, I lost co hosts, nobody knew where to find a podcast, no one knew
Right.
how to download it, nobody was advertising. There were no major advertising companies. And many times I thought I would quit. I actually probably should have, but I was delusional. I stayed
No,
with
no,
it.
look at where you are now. Yeah.
8 years
But
later, yes.
it sounds like you were truly at the forefront of what's now become one of the most popular ways to consume information and content. You know, if you're not on social media, but this is just another format to spread your message and spread your story. And imagine all the people you wouldn't have impacted if you had given up.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's paid off in the past couple of years for sure. And I love to see where podcasting is, because when I was in radio, and you probably remember this too when you were younger, women rarely hosted
Right.
morning shows. Ever, ever. Women never led morning shows. And even female program directors that I worked for, this is like 2010, not that long ago, would be like, no, women don't want to hear women on the radio. They would openly say this. That's why you always have to have a man. I mean, even Sarah, Ty, and Mel, and Ty was an amazing person. Ty was a man. It was just never gonna be the Sarah show. You always had to have a guy. And so I love seeing now all these women, from Call Her Daddy to Glennon Doyle. I mean, you can name so
Yeah.
many women that have top podcasts that are leading with other women. It's phenomenal, because the old gatekeepers of television and local radio never believed that women could lead a show.
Yeah. Or that a space would eventually evolve to allow that to happen. And guess what?
Yeah.
And technology improves, and so do we, hopefully. Yeah. No, that's super cool. Did you grow up in the DC area originally, or you moved there after college? Like, what inspired you to be in DC?
Oh my gosh, completely random. Grew up in Maine, was a Mainer, had a great childhood for the most part, and went to college in Massachusetts. And then after college, I really had no idea. I would say from the time I was 8 years old, I always knew that I wanted to talk for a living. I wanted to be a talk show host. I wanted to be on television forever. So I knew that, but I had my gunkles, as I call them, my gay uncles, who were
Yeah.
married for like 35 years before one of them passed away. They lived in DC. And they said to me when I graduated college, they were like, move to DC. It's such a great media town. Howard Stern was there for years. Like,
Right.
move to DC. I really had no other plan, so I moved to DC.
I love that. I didn't necessarily not plan it out, but like my mother and all of her sisters did stints in DC after college. Some of her sisters were lawyers and bankers and stuff, and so they lived there for a bit. And then my mom went because she was one of the first female coding and computer engineers that was ever hired by IBM, and so she was out in Manassas, Virginia area, but she did a stint after college in DC. So when I finished college, I was kind of like, well, I have to do it too, because that's part of the matriarchy. I got to go cut my teeth. And I did. And I don't regret it. It was a phenomenal place to spend my 20s and grow and make mistakes and learn about myself and like have fun, but also be surrounded by so much like culture and history and people from all over the world too. So like I got exposed to things that you would not normally get anywhere else in the country. So it was super cool.
I agree. I loved living there. It just gave me such an amazing start. And the people were awesome. It's such a media town. It's a radio town. It's a television town. Obviously, it's a politics town. So it just was, yeah, it was a great place to be.
Nice. Yeah. Well, what encouraged you to switch over to LA? Is that after the radio shows in DC ended, or did you have a particular like job offer or thing you wanted to try out there?
I don't know if you've ever had this moment, but I just knew I had gone as far as I was going to go there.
Yeah.
Nothing was, I had done everything. For 13 years too, I was the local Fox 5 DC contributor. That was the local Fox affiliate, and they did all kinds of local news and entertainment. They were incredible to me. And I was a contributor there, and I did true crime podcasts for them. Oh my God, we tested entertainment shows, but really they had offered me a job as an anchor. And I thought, I don't wanna be an anchor. I don't wanna be serious. I love interviewing crazy people. I mean, I've had a woman that's married to a chandelier on my show. I mean,
All right.
I just like
People
I
from
like
all walks of life.
all walks of life. I want them to be able to say it. I wanna talk about sex. I don't wanna be a serious anchor. So I
Sure.
knew I just kept having that feeling. I'm like, "Sarah, it's just it's been so amazing. You've learned so much here, but
Mhm.
if you wanna go next level, you have to go where, more people that are kind of creative outside the box are and not so news focused." And so it was between New York and LA, and, I like the weather in LA a lot better. So my husband was down, our son was 9 months old at the time, and we came out here, and it's been the best move ever.
Cool. I'm so glad that that's worked out for you. I've had a few cousins live in the West Coast area, one in LA, and he did love it. But it's, when you're younger, it's harder to sustain because it's a very expensive area. But it's so good that you were able to have your family's support behind you to make the big move. Is your
I
husband
was
also in radio?
No, he's in soccer.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
Well, you talk about opposites attract and a yin and a yang. He's been in the soccer business for 20 years since he was in college, mostly in youth sports. So, youth sports now is a huge industry of
Oh
club
yeah.
soccer. And so he's been a club soccer, assistant director for years, manages coaching, staffing, coaches himself, and works with US Soccer, ECNL, a lot of kind of higher level coaching clubs to recruit, train, kids that love to play soccer.
And that's super neat. Is your son interested in soccer yet, or is it still he's kind of holding out hope that like maybe he'll pick this up?
No, my husband's actually really reasonable. He doesn't care what sport our son plays. He just
Mhm.
wants him to play a team sport. So, I think he's open to anything, but I think my husband loves and sees the value of being part of a team sport, how much kids learn, even if you never
Oh, for
are
sure.
like on a high level. It's so important to do. So he just wants KJ to pick something to be a part of.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the most fun I got to have was playing team sports, and it helps you with your social skills, helps you communicate, helps you physically, enjoy activity too, and like train you to think that like my body's having fun. So like this is not a punishment. Like this is a good thing to do, and hopefully keep it in your life, right? So that's
Yes.
phenomenal. And probably helpful for you too that both of you have flexible jobs. So like if you needed to move to Chicago for randomly, both of you could because both of those things can transfer. So that's really great.
Oh, it's been amazing. Yes, thankfully, LA is a soccer town. And to your point now, every state is. And yeah, without my husband, I really would not have been able to make it on my own as a podcaster because it was just such uncharted territory. And it still is. I really believe that podcasting is in its infancy. But without him and yeah, having that stability,
Yeah.
I never would have made it. So very grateful.
Yeah. Did you see much of an impact on your marriage when you guys moved to LA? Like did you have to make any particular routine changes or sacrifices with each other to kind of get your new business off the ground or your new show off the ground?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, we've been in couples therapy for years. I'm a huge couples therapy proponent.
Advocate for that. Yeah.
I loved it. We actually went to therapy before we got married, which all of our family and friends were like, red flag, red flag. If you're in therapy before you're getting married, like, what does this mean? And I highly recommend that you go to a therapist before you marry someone because they
Okay.
will force you to have conversations that you didn't even think about. Money. What happens if one of you loses a job? What happens if one of you does want to move for your career? Does the other person really want to move for their career? I mean, I think the hardest part was my husband loved his job in Northern Virginia. His best
Yeah.
friends were there, And so through therapy and building our bond and communicating so much, I think just have such a gratitude for him because I, I often say to myself, like, would I make the sacrifices my husband has made for me for him? And it's like, probably not. Like, I'm a very selfish one.
No, it's okay. I mean, that's
Stop.
self-awareness. No, it's self-awareness. Therapy's teaching you to really look inward and think about your real answers. And if that's your truth, that's your truth. Yeah.
And sometimes in life you wake up and you realize, like, oh my gosh, I I'm really where I'm supposed to be and with the perfect person. Because I always had a vision that I would marry somebody in my industry. I always thought I'd marry somebody in entertainment or,
Yeah,
you
same.
know, I never thought I would find a guy in soccer. Like, honey, I didn't even play soccer. It's like, what? I don't even
Yeah.
know what offsides means. And then I think to myself, if I had married a guy in television, in radio, like, I probably wouldn't be here in Los Angeles pursuing my career in the way that I am because who knows, I might have had to make those sacrifices to stay married to that guy and move somewhere else. So I
Sure.
thank the universe and God every day. I'm like, I'm where I'm supposed to be with who I'm supposed to be. And I'm incredibly lucky.
How did you guys meet originally? And again, I do apologize. I'm sure you have shared this story before on your show because I did see on your YouTube channel that he comes on every now and then. So I'm sure you've brought it up. But for my listeners who may not know, how did that come about?
I love telling this story because people love it. We actually met sitting next to each other on an airplane.
Oh, okay.
So
Truly serendipitous. Yeah. Somebody put him in your path for a reason.
right? My girlfriends love this story. They always go to the airport and they're like, okay, am I going to meet my husband? Like, how did you do this again?
Yeah.
So I just happened to be sitting next to, we all boarded a plane in Tampa, Florida, and the flight had been delayed and delayed. And of course, I'd had several drinks at the bar. And I sat down next to this guy and I was like, oh, he's kind of cute. And he had his weather app out and he was looking at all the different weather. And I was like, so what's the deal? Are we going to get out of here? And he's like, I don't think we are. I think there's going to be another thunderstorm by the time they push back. So I said, okay. And my girlfriend, who I worked in radio with, she was sitting next to us. Anyway, he was right. They deboarded the plane and then the crew was
Oh,
overtime. So they were going to have to get a whole new crew in there. So my friend said, all right, let's invite him to the bar. Like, this guy's cute. Like, let's invite him to the bar. And we invited him to the bar. I was like near pass out at this point. So I don't really remember what. I guess
you're
he
like,
got on,
sure, why not?
he got on well with my friends and coworkers. We flew back to DC eventually. We got off the plane and I gave him, like, I had been on so many horrendous dates with terrible men. I refused to give him my phone number. So I gave him a crumpled up business card that was coffee stained. And I was like, oh, here, it was nice to meet you. And he emailed me. I put his phone number in the email and then I texted.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't even know this. I read it to my girlfriend. She's the one that's like, he's giving you his number, like text it. Because I was just going to email him back. She's like, no, he's telling you to text him. I texted him. Anyway, then he called me. We had dinner and we've been together. It's been, I think, 11 years total.
Yeah. Ever since.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I'm
Yeah.
usually the friend that's like laughing, like, oh, let's talk to them. Let's bring them over. Like, let's see if they're cool, if they can hang, then you can call them back. Like, let's see if they can pass the test. Do they fit the vibe? But that's wonderful. I'm so glad that worked out well for you. That's cool.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, people are always, they're like, what? You met on an airplane for, I'm like,
Yeah.
dead serious. Yeah.
Meet cutes are rare now. I don't know how many of your friends are still using the apps or not, but I've given up. I don't do it. I don't like it. It makes me feel so icky and uncomfortable. And I don't like being inauthentic or people being disingenuous. And so it's very difficult for me, at least, to assess who somebody is just through a screen. And I've had way too many times where I've said yes to something and then I show up and either they ghost, they don't come at all, or they do come, but they don't look like their photos. So then it's a little jarring to start the date out like that. And you're kind of like, oh, okay. There's nothing wrong with you as a person necessarily. It's just that you sold me something different. So now I'm like, oh, okay. I got to rethink how I'm going to approach this. And like, that kind of sucks because you almost feel like you're starting out on a lie and you don't want to. So
Isn't it so jarring? It's so hard to get back on track, isn't it? It's like when
a little bit.
I've obviously I'm married, but I find this with women now. Like if I'm here in LA and I meet somebody that's whatever, like TikTok star or something, and then
Sure.
we're like going to go to an event together. We're going to meet up for coffee, and then what they look like in real life, I'm actually
Mhm.
taken aback. I'm like, oh shit, I thought you were 24. Like, you're
Mhm.
looking like edit themselves so much.
They
You're just like,
do.
wait a minute. It
Yeah,
takes a second, doesn't it, to get back on track?
it does a bit. Yeah, no. And as a person, I know, at least I'm self-aware enough to know that like I really, really value integrity. And so like for me, how you choose to show up for yourself tells me how you're going to show up to the rest of the world and like how much self-respect you have or like self-care that you implement into your life. And like if you can't set your own boundaries or whatever, like it's a lot. And I've gotten more to the point where I'm willing to like shut the door, just be like, I don't even have time to waste on this. Like, I'm sure you're a perfectly nice person. You will be a better fit for the right person. It's just not me. I've told myself I can't live anymore forcing it to happen. Like, I would rather it be similar to what happened to you, where it's just, if it's meant for me, it'll come for me. And if it doesn't, then I get to still live this cool life doing what I want to do in the
Oh,
meantime.
it will happen. And it happens when you completely give up. I had given up. I was
Okay.
I know.
Yeah. I'm almost there. Yeah, I'm almost there.
Right. Well, let me tell you, it happens when you've given up. And I had given up because I had been in DC. I went out with a guy. He gave his brother, who was a professional clown, my cell phone number without my permission prior to the date. And the clown called me and said, I think it'd be really funny if we played a joke on my brother and I showed up at the restaurant and like did some sort of like magic trick for you.
Do a
And I was
bit.
like,
Yeah.
are you fucking kidding? Like, my love life is not a goddamn clown act at a restaurant. That was one. I was also a guy asked me out. He ran DC Kickball League, and
Ooh.
he goes, "Oh, we'll just like stop by this like Christmas party event that I'm having, like we'll just stop by and we'll stay for like an hour or two and then, let's go out to dinner." So I was like, "Okay, sure. Yeah, that sounds great."
Yeah. Meet some of
Um,
your friends. Yeah.
we get down to Alexandria, Virginia. It's a boat ride on the Potomac, and he
No.
printed up flyers, and I was the VIP speaker. So he basically used me instead of paying
Yeah.
my talent fee to be the host. And throughout the night was like, "Hey, do you mind getting on? Could you just get on the mic and what if you just made like one announcement or did a giveaway?" I'm like, I first of all, how I got on a boat with a stranger. don't
In the winter, you're like, no, absolutely not.
Tell me there was a lot wrong, okay? I was in my 20s. There was a lot wrong with this. But
Oh,
I
yeah.
had given up. And when I met my husband, I was like a drunken mess. I was like probably 25 pounds heavier than I am now. I had zero effort. I refused to give him my phone number. It's just like, I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like that, I was so over it. And then I just met this guy that was like the perfect person. But I
Yeah.
think you have to, yeah, yeah. And I was with you. I was kind of, I mean, it was 10 years ago. So it was sort of
Mhm.
even when dating apps were first,
Yeah,
it was like
first really coming around. Yeah, I kind
this
of remember
mingle
like
and there was
2009-ish, 2010-ish when I really first ever heard of them or started to use them-ish. But they were brand new, and most of that was mostly because Grindr came out first, and like
yeah.
then everything kind of mimicked it after that or improved upon whatever, expanded the opportunities, I guess, rather. It's not a thing. I don't use it in my life right now, and I think that that's fine.
Oh, you're smart.
But I know that there's also been super success stories. There's been so many of my friends that have met on Tinder or Bumble or whatever, and it has worked out. And so I know that it works. It just hasn't worked for me. So
Yeah.
it is
Try
what
a
it is.
different avenue. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and who knows? Because I was living in DC and then Philly. I got transferred for a couple of years and lived in Philly for 3, and now I'm back in Nashville. So who knows? Maybe Nashville's where it's meant to be, or I got to move somewhere else. I don't know.
I think
Well,
I think it will be Nashville. I feel like everyone is moving to Nashville. It seems like people are a little, I don't know. Is Nashville becoming DC though? You know how DC was such a transient city. It was very hard to meet.
Nashville is very transient. Yes.
Yeah.
It didn't used to be like that. Like obviously it may have been transient initially for like music artists and stuff. Like if they're trying to come in for a few weeks or months at a time to like get deals or get their name started, cut a record or whatever. But now it's just transient in general because there's so many different industries here. So like hospital, automotive, education. So people are only here temporarily often. So I actually get called a unicorn a lot because I'm from born and raised in Nashville and now living again in Nashville. So like I'm considered very rare. That's not very common to actually meet a true Nashvilleian that's still in Nashville proper. A lot of them have like moved out to what's now considered the suburbs. But yeah.
Oh,
So
love that.
it's weird. It's weird, but it's fun. And like, it's better. I know I made the right decision because it's better for me to be closer to home right now at this point in my life. And so like my parents are only about 4 hours away. My brother's about 5 hours and compared to like 14 from where I was. So it's making my life my personal life has much more flexibility than it used to. And right now that's important to me. And that may change as time goes on. But for now, it's a good fit.
I love it. Yes. Sounds like you're in a
Yeah.
good spot.
Yeah. Well, how did your move to LA kind of impact your career trajectory? Like, what did you learn about yourself as you got started out there?
Well, I'm a big believer, and I don't know if you feel this way in your career, but I definitely, I over the years, I've really cultivated, like, I know my gut. My gut really guides me. And my gut, when I came to LA a couple years ago to decide, like, if we were going to move here, this is actually before the pandemic, because we were going to move prior to the pandemic.
Mm,
Then the pandemic struck, and obviously we stayed in DC, and we got pregnant. We had our son.
yeah.
So I'm really a big, like, I feel it. If I feel it, I just have to do it. And
Okay.
so truly I felt it. And from the moment I stepped foot in LA, like, doors opened. And I don't know if you feel that way in your career or your listeners do, but when I tell you, and again, I mean, I've been in this business a long time. So it wasn't like I moved here on a whim and decided all of a sudden I was going to be an
Yeah.
actress.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. You're
like, I
you're
know
not
how
yeah
to do
you're not
that.
busting tables being like I'm gonna be a star instead
No,
of
right.
interviewing the stars. Yeah.
I already knew my plan. I did when I first moved here, I did try stand-up comedy because I've
Oh
always
yeah.
been curious to be a stand-up comedian, but I actually physically can't stand up past 9:30. I go to bed at 9:10. So
Right. And they are a night owl career. So yeah, you'd have
they
to
would call
totally switch.
they'd be like, "Fraser, we have a spot for you at 11:45 PM out in
Yep.
the valley." I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm in, like, circadian sleep at this point. Like, I cannot. No, I can't. So I realized I wasn't gonna be a stand-up comedian. But, when I tell you, I feel like people should spend a lot of time cultivating their gut, because from the moment we landed here, just things happened, interviews that I'd never gotten before. I just had an exclusive
Mm.
interview with Drake Bell after Quiet on Set
Yes.
doc.
Yeah.
I
That was
I
such a
got
good
that.
interview too.
Thank you, thank you. I got that because, 1, we had a mutual friend in common, and 2, I pitched myself, probably, like, I'd actually pitched myself for him to be on my show a year prior to him coming on my show.
Oh wow.
So you got to be patient a lot of times. But even, like, last year, I got booked on Lifetime's Married at First Sight. And again, this was through a woman. I'm really good at, I think, once I establish a relationship, trying to keep it. This was a woman who had booked people from Love is Blind. She was a PR woman on my show years prior. She loved the interview. And she said to me, "I'm booking now for Lifetime's Married at First Sight, like their after party show, their couples couch. Would you and your husband do it?" So
Mm.
everything opened up for me so fast. And the only other time in my life that's happened is when I moved to DC. When I'll tell, like, the moment my uncles were like, "Come here," and I went there for a weekend, I just could feel it. I was like, "Okay, this is it." And within a couple years, I was on this number one morning show. So I'm a big believer. You have to work. You have to work a lot. My husband and I work 6 days a week. It's not like you can just manifest it and sit back and all of it happens. But
Right.
I really slow down, and I really think about it, and I really feel it. And if my gut feels it, it usually happens.
Yeah. So then you've learned to say yes when you need to say yes and no when you need to say no. And I kind of feel like sometimes when you're starting out, you may get stuck with saying like you have to accept everything anytime an opportunity comes towards you because you're just so desperate to get off the ground or like get things going. But like I think that that's really smart that you've figured out how to say, yes to certain things that actually align with what it is, what your main goal is, but then also who is the Sarah Fraser show? What brand is that? What feeling do I want my audience to have when they watch my show? And like if I bring this person on, is it going to align with what my goal is? And if not, then maybe I just don't do it right now or I don't push it before it's ready to happen.
And you know what changed that for me, which I always thought it would never. This is like how life
Sure, yeah.
surprises you, is becoming a mom. I
Really?
Yeah, I never wanted to get married, and I never wanted to have a child because I thought they would ruin my career. And I actually had a woman probably 5 years ago who was a guest on my show, and she said to me, I was telling her those fears, and she said to me, "I'll tell you what, I work with corporate women all the time, and every single one of them have had a child and their career has gotten better." Because what a child does is it forces you to be incredibly mindful of your time. If you want to be with that kid, you don't have time to. I chased so many foolish leads all through my 30s, and it said yes to stupid stuff, and even things, because we only have so much energy. We only have so much time. For years, I was asked, like, for a long time, to host charity events for free. I did it. And then I got to a point where it's like, you know what? These are organizations that have budget. And this is 2 hours out of my life on a Saturday night, and it's
Yeah.
hours prior to prep, or they're asking for a rehearsal. Like you can't do that. Like I would never no offense to charity. I love charity events. I do help some, but I would never host a charity event unless Kathy Hilton called me. Then I would for her.
Then you're like, "Oh, yeah.
For Kathy, I
Anytime,
will
girl."
do
Yeah.
anytime. Kathy wants me to host, but I don't think I would host many charity events for free anymore at all. I just wouldn't.
Sure. No, and that's a big lesson to learn too, and I get that. What would you say was maybe your biggest mistake when you were first starting out in this particular career? What was like that is a particular lesson, but did you have any like major ones where you're like, "Oh god, I wish I had known that before I'd started," or like,
Okay,
do
now
you think it just kind of is what it is?
which career? The radio career, the TV career, or the podcast career? Because I have regrets in
Yep.
all three.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's go with your current stuff. So your TV and your podcasting.
Well, the biggest mistake I made in podcasting was financial. I never thought I would be an entrepreneur and own my own business because I worked for iHeartRadio and Cumulus and Fox for years. Like I was
Mhm.
used to getting a 401k, like set it and forget it, health benefits. So in 2016, I had to become an entrepreneur. And I'd gotten a ridiculous severance package. It was like $75,000 or something. And I blew all that money. I paid co-hosts, I paid producers, I paid podcast rental space. And what you find out in the podcast world is none of that people are not going to tune into your show if you rent $1,000 podcast space. They're going to
Right.
tune in based on the content you're providing, the guest, what outlandish thing you're saying. And I didn't know any of that. I had to blow and even like a podcast co-host, it's something people have to really think about because of course your co-host is putting up their time if they want to eventually be paid. I My hosts were my co-hosts were unbelievable. They're still all my friends to this day, but paying them really took away from money that I could have put in my own pocket. And so I had to learn as an entrepreneur, for me, like doing it bootstraps was much better. And even today, I'm 8 years in. I make six figures in this show, doing this show every single year.
Yeah.
I do most of it myself. Like I hire a couple people and I outsource a few things, but now I'm so much more conscious of like the money that's going in my pocket.
Right. And where it's going and where to actually prioritize spending it and stuff to
Yeah.
sustain this for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And paying attention to the numbers because they matter, because they matter. And again, it's like for some people, they've had a co-host and they have multi-million-dollar podcast shows and it's completely worked. For me, I have found over the years, it does not work for me. So it's like
Sure.
knowing yourself in business, paying attention to the numbers, that's completely changed my career.
Yeah. And what about for your TV career? I know didn't you did do some work on HBO, or you were on a show, right, as well? And I apologize, I'm blanking on the name.
I did an episode of HBO's Crashing,
Yes, Crashing. There you go. Yeah.
season 3, episode 7. Okay, I wasn't really an actress long enough to learn any lessons. Like I had a really fun time, but it was such a long day. I was like, I don't think I can do this business either because I have
Just seen it
ADD.
forever, yeah.
I was like, I can't be here for 14 hours. With television, I think with TV, the biggest mistake was a lot of local television, they're also trying to adapt. They're kind of where radio was 15 years ago, where it's like, oof, is anyone going to watch local television anymore? And my biggest mistake was I spent a lot of time pitching. You have to know when to quit things. I spent a lot of time pitching them things that they were never going to do. Like and I didn't see it. I didn't see, and you only know that from experience. But it's in moving to LA, I've been working with a lot of producers and they recruit talent all the time. And they kind of get to the point where like, if the talent doesn't want it, you can't convince them and you need to move on. And they're very quick about it.
Okay.
It's sort of the same way with a network. Like when you go up for a pitch, like if they're not interested, because a lot of times they're interested and then they come back with a lot of edits and all that stuff. But I would pitch a lot to Fox and they really were never interested and I never really got it. And I kept doing it and it was really like banging my head against the wall. So no
Yeah,
offense.
no.
I love them. I'm grateful for everything. I'm still in touch with all my Fox family, but it was a waste of time because I was trying to get them to do an entertainment, comedy, late night show, and they are in the news business. And I wish I'd learned that lesson way earlier.
Yeah, they have their bread and butter. They know what they're good at. They want to stay in their lane, and maybe it's just not meant to be for that. Yeah. Would you pitch it as you as the host, or you had someone in mind that you thought would be a great position and you wanted to like executive produce it?
God, over the years, I've had so many different shows. Ones that I host, ones that I co-host, ones where I've cast like a whole other set of people. So
Yeah.
and it's I actually do think local news is going to have to evolve in some ways, and I think they're going to start licensing content from creators that do well online because I think they're going to try to attract an audience that way. So it's funny because I could
Yeah.
actually see it coming full circle and then doing something with Fox on a streaming platform later down the road. But I pitched everything under the sun. I pitched everything under the sun to them, and it just wasn't they weren't going to do it, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, where do you feel if you sound like a very creative person and you've got obviously a lot of really great ideas or at least things that you believe could come to fruition in some way. Where do you actually feel most in your element? Behind the scenes as an editor, just kind of financing certain ideas up, or do you want to be back in TV, back in radio, or strictly staying in podcasting? Where do you feel most in your element?
Well, I hate editing because it takes so much time, and I am not no, I need to slow down. So I absolutely hate editing. I I love the business side of it because I believe entertainment is really on the cusp of a huge change where I think it's
Okay.
going to go for the first time in the favor of creators because these from Netflix to local news outlets, they're not going to put the budget in to develop these shows the way they did. So I think it's an incredible opportunity for creators to own their own content, license their work back to these people. And we're kind of getting, I think, even more creative because now people are doing so many different things on YouTube, TikTok. So I'm super excited. I'm most myself doing my podcast show, creating something that people are either entertained by or inspired or they're yelling at their, you know,
Yeah,
iPhone because they're
they're
like,
debating it.
I
Yeah,
hate
they're
this,
yelling at you while you're talking. Yeah.
I hate
Oh.
this tape. So I love doing that, but I also really I was telling you before we started, because I've learned so many different things and made so many mistakes, but also really developed like a system where you can make this an income, you can make it a side hustle income or there's a path to making it a full-time income. I really want to show other creators how to do that, and I think I could see myself eventually doing some sort of network with those creators because I do think people your age, my age, younger, I just don't think they're going to go back to a lot of television in the
Right.
way
Yeah.
that
No, it's
yeah.
definitely evolving. I don't remember the last time I paid for cable, to be quite honest. I've just had the streaming services for the longest time. As soon as Apple came out with like the Apple TV, that's just what I've rotated with. And then all the apps can get added to that. So that's just where my family has stayed and that's what we've done. And so I think you're right. And how we are consuming information and entertainment now is changing. And if you want to still get that and sell that to people, you have to evolve to match the way that they want to receive it, right? Like that's
Absolutely.
to me, it gets back to marketing and sales and understanding human behavior and psychology. It's all intertwined. So I could nerd
Yeah.
out about that too. I hope there's a whole section on that in your future training when you talk about running your business. It's cool.
I love sales now too. I'm obsessed with sales. Podcasting sales are 2 billion a year. They're only going to go higher. People
Wow.
they're not going to bring budget back to local radio. They're not going to bring budget back to local TV. There's so much money to be made in podcasting and people just don't know how to do it yet. They don't know how to like do it. And some people are really great creators but not on the business side. So
Sure.
that's like somebody I'm interested in helping because if you really don't know sales or you don't have a like to it, it's hard to do that for sure.
Hmm.
But there's so much opportunity and there's so many ways. I think content creators in the future are going to be able to double dip where they're licensing their video portion to places, but they're then monetizing the audio part. Then they're using their likeness for. I mean, there's just so many things, and that excites
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
No, that's phenomenal. Have you ever considered starting your own network
Oh,
too? Like I know like Alex Cooper from Call Her Daddy like started her own Unwell network and she's picking up and the next generations like influencers, I guess, and putting them under her umbrella. And there's so many different companies now that have podcasting or audiobook networks that are kind of combined, and they're sharing that and putting that out there. And I don't know, I don't know if I've actually found an entertainment only kind of network. Would that be something that would interest you, or do you still want to just stay in with your stuff?
I want to go work for Alex. Alex, hire me. Hire me. That sounds much
Yeah.
easier.
I know. I tag her every time I post something. Even though I'm not on her network, I'm just like unwell, unwell, unwell. Everybody that's listening to my show, Alex, they are very lost. They are very sad. They're very frustrated. They want to be well, but right now they're unwell, including me.
Yeah.
I wish I need to practice my pitch better for her, but one of these days I want to meet her and at least be like, whether I ever get to work for you or not, I'm inspired by your entrepreneurship. It's super cool to see somebody carve their own way and make it happen. I think that's amazing. Especially like you said, a female host. Yeah, it's not as common.
15 years ago, there's no way these media companies
That would have ever
would have
happened, yeah.
taken her seriously. They never would have given her a $60 million deal that she got from Spotify. I love it. I love to see it. I
Mhm.
want to see more women do it. To answer your question about a network, yes, I have toyed with the idea for a long time of doing a network. I think it's, I go back and forth about, I've worked with talent for years in television,
Sure.
in radio. It is the business where people have the biggest egos. I probably maybe rivals tech. I feel like tech, you deal with a lot of
Maybe
egos.
tech, yeah.
So, when you take on a network, a lot of times you are managing their egos, and it's like, I don't know, do I have the bandwidth to do that and do my own show? Do I do a network and hire like an amazing manager? Because some people are just incredible at managing egos and dynamics. I think I would really need that person on board because I tend to be too nice. Like, I want people to love the environment they're in. I want people to, like, I don't really give a shit when people work. If you want to work from midnight to 4 a.m. and do something else the rest of your time, like, fine. I just want the work done.
Yeah.
I don't want to handhold. But, as you work with
I as a project manager, yes. Yes, I am. I am a professional cat herder, hand holder, Swiss knife uh,
okay,
attachment. Yeah, I got
you
it.
can come and manage
Sure.
the TSFS network because it's right. I mean, it is a complete skill. When you have the brilliance to be a cat herder, it is like you are worth your weight in gold because it's very
Yeah.
difficult. And people that start out great, as you know, life happens and then they're not. And so
Of
I don't
course.
know. That's my thing that's holding me up. I think that's the next thing I really need to feel because part of me is sort of like go all in and create the wild Sarah Fraser show in video form that you've wanted to do and release it in audio and make that next level. And then maybe, if you don't become acquired by like an unwell, maybe that's when you start looking at other talent that you could partner with. So I guess
And bring
I,
in, yeah.
I can't quite say yet what direction.
No, then that's totally fair. And that I'm asking because I'm curious, trying to learn from somebody that's done this a lot longer than I have and who actually has insight into an industry that I'm just now like the door is open and I'm peeking through and I just haven't fully busted through yet. And it's fascinating. So I appreciate you letting me pick your brain about that. But I'm curious because you've had such a long career with this and you've met so many different people from all over the country and you've built this incredible platform talking to people and helping them share their stories. Is there anybody that you've ever like fangirled over, or do you have a dream guest list for somebody to come on your show?
My dream guest is Sandra Bullock.
Oh, yeah.
I just like
So
what
gorgeous.
I mean,
Yeah.
stunning, incredible career, but has been through the ringer with men. I mean,
Yeah.
to have Jesse James, who we all thought was this like reformed biker gang
Mhm.
tattoo artist,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
I guess I don't think he was ever in a biker gang, but I mean, to have him like cheating on her with these like trashy strippers, and she's like this amazing Oscar-winning like class act. And that's what I love about her. She's remained a class act, which is so rare
The
in this
entire
business,
time, yeah.
including myself. I'm a complete whore for like any like. So, to have this woman be such a class act is I just want to know how she's done it. Like who's been her support team, and now her husband of like only 3 years just died of ALS at like
Right?
56. I mean, how this woman has picked herself back up kept
Over and over and over
going.
again. Yeah.
Yes, and then succeeded in a business that we're all finding out, right? Went through this Me Too and Time's Up, and like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, she was the one of the biggest Hollywood actresses of all time. I just think they don't make them that way anymore. She's so unique. Oh, I don't even know. I wouldn't be able to get the words out. I'd be so in awe.
Yeah.
She's
No, I
amazing.
think that that's a great answer. She's phenomenal. I used to joke with my mom that if they ever made a Lifetime movie about my life, like I would want her to play me. But like obviously she's a little bit older than me, but I've admired her so much. One of my favorite movies of all time is Practical Magic. Like I could recite that whole thing uh, word for word. And I actually have a cousin that has bright red hair, and so like we used to pretend that that was us, like when we were little, like because we were united and constantly together all the time, and it was one of our favorite things. And so I admired her for so long, and you're exactly right, smart, talented, poised, and has been able to compose herself and still somehow, despite having a very publicly tragic personal life, she gets to have boundaries. And like you don't hear much about her otherwise, her personally or her children personally. So like she gets to have to me as an outsider seems having the ability to protect that. Not a lot of famous people or actors and actresses get to have that kind of protection or that kind of limelight control. So I think it's very cool that she's figured out either how to stay out of it when she wants to, but come back into it when she needs to. And yeah,
And
it's
still
amazing.
I think she probably still commands 25 or 30 million dollars a movie, and she's like
Probably.
close to 60. Like I think she just is like this superwoman that I admire. You know what I mean? I feel like she's defied
Yeah,
age. She's defied obstacles. She lost her mom, I think, when she was like 19 or
pretty
20.
young. Yeah.
She and her
Yeah.
sister. And speaking of the DC area, which you and I have in common, she grew up in Arlington, Virginia,
Hmm.
and I just think to of somebody, because of course a lot of people say, well, yeah, your life's easy because she has so much money. But I mean, she didn't come from anything. I
Right.
mean, to come from nothing, create Hollywood, keep the money, go through all the tragedies she's had, and to still, I mean, be putting one foot in front of the other is just, yeah. She's a dream interview.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to add her to the list now too, because you're right. I bet you she would have a lot to offer the lost and found community. So I think that's brilliant. I hope you get to do it. You open the door and then you let her know that you have a friend that would also like to interview her, and we can make it happen. Everybody send Sarah some good vibes so that way she can have that come to fruition for herself.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Talking about pros and cons of being in this particular industry, especially I'm sure a lot of your guests have talked about their life and how difficult that's been and how it's affected them. How has it been for you as an interviewer? You have a very public persona, but you also have a personal life. Is there such a thing as a balance? And like, do you get to have a boundary between what you share and what doesn't get shared? And like, is there a line, or do you have difficulty like not letting it affect you?
I have no boundaries. I would share everything in my life, but my husband is he really there are things like, I don't know, our sex life, our our
Sure. Yeah.
finances, a lot of things he would prefer not to be out there. I would be an open book. I would share everything. I do not care what people think of me. It took me a long time to get there. And again, I've been in this business since I was 25. So when I'm just so used to getting like 10 great messages and then one message that's like, "Oh, you're so old and you're ugly," and that like, I don't
Yeah.
even care about that. And I think if somebody has that much time to write you, like, that shows you how engaged they are. And in fact, I really do have a theory now. I don't think you can even make it in this business without hate. Like, you have to be there. Look at this celebrity block that's going on TikTok, where they're blocking celebrities if you don't talk about politics, if you don't use your platform for good. It's like, what? Who the fuck do these people like? You think Kim Kardashian cares? Like, give me a break. People are still they're gonna do that, and then they're gonna go buy Skims. I mean, this is like,
Yeah.
I think Taylor Swift has recently lost 50,000 followers because she won't get politically involved. And it's like, you really think these people aren't going to go to her Eras tour and another, like, of course they are. They're going to all line up. It's just, I've learned that what people do online and what they do in real life is completely different. And
Sure.
so I do not care what people think. I would share it all. I think the only thing that becomes difficult is, and this is where my husband and I kind of debate, is like, once you bring the kids in, because their minds are really not
Mhm.
developed to be able to realize that half these people online are probably bots, or, they're unfortunately very sad human beings. Like, who cares what they think? So I think that's the only thing. But my husband and I have definitely, probably our biggest arguments in our lives have been over bits and things that I've done on the radio
Sure.
that have hurt him. But so I try to find that balance, and I run things by him if I think, oh, is he gonna like this?
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I would be completely Kris Jenner if it wasn't for my husband. I would just be like, get out there, sweetie. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we're building a brand. They're
Yeah,
still
we're
gonna
building an
buy
empire. Yeah.
no matter what they say.
No.
And get out there,
Mhm.
sweetie. Get on stage. But
Yeah. No, do you subscribe to Masterclass at all? Or have
yes,
you listened to did you listen to hers? I actually that was the first one I ever downloaded. I don't know if that's cringe of me to admit, but when I first joined, my mom got me a subscription for Christmas, but hers was all about building your own personal brand and how she did that for her children and what that looks like now and how she's been able to cultivate that and sustain it, and then like tips and tricks that you could do. And I just found it absolutely fascinating because people always joke like, I wish she was my mother. Like, I wish she was controlling my career. I wish she had, was supporting my brand, whatever. But it's truly, truly fascinating. So I know you're saying that jokingly, but there's definitely a bit of truth in there. Like, if anybody's got it on lock and has figured out how to not use haters as fuel, it's her.
oh my God. I mean, what
Yeah.
she's done is unbelievable. I don't know that because you talked about integrity and kind of your reputation at the start of this. And I think
Mhm.
it's different. Like, I don't know if you watched the Tom Brady roast with Kim Kardashian.
I
They
did, yeah.
went hard for Kim. And I was debating this with somebody I podcast with. And I'm like, I don't know. Could I be a billionaire, but be basically like the slut joke for everybody? Like, could I don't know. To me, that is like, God, could I do a sex tape to be worth $1 billion? And of course, my co-host is like, yes, 100%. Yes, I could do it. And he was like,
Yeah.
absolutely, release the tape. But then I'm like, I don't know if I could do
Yeah.
it. Not that many people care, but I think it's your own personal integrity. And I don't think Kim actually cares what people say about her, but I do
No,
think
I don't
that's
think so.
it's like, damn, it's rough when people are joking about, how much of a slut you are. Like, it's like the butt of it's pretty that's I don't know, hard to take, I think. But
Sure. Well, I bet again, I don't know them. I only casually follow them. Last year I did actually the closest thing I've ever come to the Kardashians was I did the model audition for Good American. They came to Nashville last year, and
oh,
I did sign up and go and do that. I didn't win. They picked phenomenal, beautiful women to be their next round of this season's models, but it was a great way to get out of my comfort zone. But it was just very, very cool to witness what one of their particular businesses is like and the culture behind it and the people that work there. And just you could tell that the vibe was just people that were there were truly in love and believed in that mission and were really into it. So like there's no way that you spend 20 years of your life being that joke and not being able to develop the thick skin because you've figured out other ways to establish yourself. And
yeah.
like if she grew beyond that particular tape, it was purposeful because if she just decided this is might be how I break through, but it won't be what defines me. So I think that that's good, but I don't know them personally, but I would think that that gets old. You've heard the same joke for 20 years. You're probably like, okay, you got anything new yet? Like,
No. And you're right. And she's probably completely unfazed. And by the way, I love Chloe. Chloe's actually probably my favorite one.
oh yeah.
So,
Uh-huh.
no, what they've done and how they've managed to stay a family and how they've managed to, what I think is actually kind of keeping it mentally together, because unfortunately we've seen amazing stars like Britney Spears, and they just pay such a huge price. So for them to continue to be a family and all of them be successful is like mind blowing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Pretty-
Have there been any particular cons for you starting this career and going forward with it? Is there anything that you wish you could change about the industry that hasn't worked well or has been a negative effect on your life?
Hmm. Oh, that's so good. No, I think, like we were talking about, was the most difficult part was my husband. It was, I
Having the boundaries with him, yeah.
yeah, like they're to me the most two important people. So I would never want to do anything that hurt my husband. And definitely at points in my career I've done that, so that's been hard. But now we've been together long enough and we work at our marriage and we do therapy and we over communicate probably. So now I kind of have a sense, and I think you have to
Mhm.
find that boundary before you can fix it.
Yeah,
So that's probably been the biggest one. But no, I love what I do. I thank God every day. I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm living the dream. Like this is unbelievable."
sure. Yeah, no, I'm only asking because I'm curious. Like, LA is a very specific Hollywood life. That section of the globe there, it's a very sometimes considered like superficial, or you're only caring about your looks or how you're perceived. And like you did mention earlier that you don't care what anybody believes or says about you. You want to be as authentic to yourself as possible, but sometimes I think maybe that industry might try and break you down or make you feel bad about that. And I was just curious if it had ever, affected your own self-esteem sometimes, trying to fit into a mold that they want you to fit in. Or do you say F that to all of it and you don't really care?
Well, I think it was harder before the internet. Like I think a decade ago, 2 decades
Okay.
ago to come to Hollywood was so much harder. I always think 2 things. 1, I'm glad I moved to Hollywood when I was 40 because I already knew who I was. I'm confident. Like I can't walk into a room. I mean, I've certainly walked into a room. I hear it all the time. People give me one-star reviews or they're like, you're ugly, you're fat, you're short, whatever. So, but now I'm like, that if somebody said that to my face, that would never crush me. I'd be like, oh, please. I mean,
Yeah.
and I just move, I keep it moving.
Hmm.
And the thing I think is the biggest lie about Hollywood is there's this perception when you don't live here that everyone here is 22 and the only people working are 22 and you have to be thin and you have to be young. And when you move here, you find out, oh my God, people of all ages, all shapes. And I'm not saying all of them are becoming multimillionaires and huge stars, but I
Sure.
mean, there's an enormous population in Los Angeles that are working actors, musicians, and I mean, they're making a good living. They own a home. They're like buying cars. They're really in it. And actually LA has been amazing for my confidence because when I go to auditions or I go to things, I just went for a TV audition to pitch myself for a show. I mean, like the guy running it is like 70, and like some of
Yeah.
the other
Okay.
people in the other TV, you know, you're like you have this thing where everybody in Hollywood is young. And there's certainly that, but like people of all ages are working and pitching. And now more than ever, I mean, you see people later and later in life making it. I mean, I love Jelly Roll's whole thing. He's like, I really didn't hit my stride till I was 38, 39. You
Right.
think if you're not 15 and doing this, that it's over. But so many people you discover, like they didn't make it till they were 40. They didn't make it till they were 45. They didn't have a hit song covered till they were 50. So I actually find that Hollywood's been really great for my self-esteem. And to me, this is a town, like if you know who you are, it's hard to rock you, because
Yeah.
it's like, and you lived in DC. DC's one of the phoniest places too. So
Yeah. My
well
yeah.
prepped, well.
No, the episode that came out, so we're recording on May 17th. The episode that came out this particular week, I was talking to the guest and we talked about that he was like, I would go to a party sometimes and I would walk out of there not knowing anyone's name, but I would know who they worked for, which senator they had interned with, and what level of clearance they had. And like that is what would matter more than who you are as a person. Your value to someone in that particular city, which even though that was 10 years ago when we first started doing that, over 10 years ago, in fact, um, we it is still the same today. Like that your value is only based on what can you offer me, how much access do you have, and can I benefit from that access somehow. And that was difficult, because you start to not trust people, or you start to not like want to tell people about who you are or what you do. And like you do also need to be careful because that's national security stuff. So like it was a weird way to walk a fine line all the time, but still have to find a way to get up the ladder without revealing too much. I don't know. It was a cluster. I don't know how I
Yeah.
got out of there unscathed.
No, I used to, right? I mean, there's this saying in DC that like the first question out of people's mouths is always, what do you do? Like, what do
Yeah.
you do for a living? That was like
What do you? Yeah.
always the thing, right? And then I always used to think to myself, well, because I hated it too for a long time and obviously was went through tons of horrible relationships and used and abused by men and all these things. And then I kind of began to go, you know what? In a way, it's a great thing because when you talk to somebody and that's their first or second question, I mean, don't they reveal to you everything? They just gave you their playbook.
Yeah, you already know. You've seen the
You
playbook
already
over and
know.
over again. Yeah.
You know what they're after. They're not interested in being your friend. And then, then the more because I used to, my radio co-host Kane, I got hired there. And 2 weeks after I got hired, he was like, okay, you're really in this. And he goes, congrats. It's not show
Mhm.
friendship, it's show business. And I was like, oh, that's such a weird thing to say. Like, well, but we're best
What are you
friends.
talking
We're
about?
best
Yeah.
friends. Anyway, they treated me like that saying was the saying there. And that's exactly how they treated me. And I was so resentful and angry of that for so long. And then I realized, like, in a way, now I don't take it as personally. I'm like, it is a business. And I
Mhm.
understand there are bottom lines and people have to make things. And in a way, too, I'm like, I would rather have somebody be honest with me, like, hey, can you help me get this? And in return, I'll help you do that. Like, I would just, now I'm at a point, I don't take it personally. I don't care. And to me, if someone's motto is that, like, I'm like, all right, I get it. Like, that's your business. And now I know who I'm dealing with. Like, it's so much more refreshing than when I used to see it as being so angry. Like, how could you be this way to people? How could you? It's like, now I'm like, I get it.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if is really good. Maybe that's very cynical, but I don't know. Does it that like out here, it just doesn't bother me. And I also think lots of times people have good intentions, like they want to put you in a film or they want to have a meeting with you, but they have their own deadlines. They have their own expectations they have to meet. And so I never take it personally. I always believe if it's meant to work out, it'll work
Sure.
out. And, now I'm better at knowing when a door is not going to be open. And there's so many other avenues now. It's like I don't have to beg.
No, you don't. You've done the work, you've established yourself, you know what you're worth and what your ideas are going to be worth. And I agree. I think that's great that you've learned how to not sell yourself short, for lack of a better term there. Yeah. Because I kind of feel like living in DC taught me everybody has an agenda, but it's up to you to decide how you want to let that agenda be involved in your life or not, and that can go in any industry, not just living there. But it was a good part of my life and good part of my growing up years, and I don't regret it. But it can be stressful when you're in an environment like that maybe you're not truly in love with what you do. So that's so good that you were able to move to a city where that could flourish for you even further. So that's phenomenal.
And I just think it's one of the best things about getting older is you just get so much more confident in your skill set. And like, I mean, you work with people. I'm sure you see how
Hmm.
skilled you are and you're like, oh Lord, okay. Well, like
I
I can do a lot and
most
I'm worth a lot more
no.
than you guys.
Oh my gosh. No, that's very thoughtful of you to say that. When you were saying that, I started to think like, yeah, the number one thing that's been written on all of my employee reviews for the last several years is she's incredibly competent. And I'm like, is that not the bare minimum to like do my job? But like apparently just she is incredibly competent. We
No,
love
you
working
don't,
with her. And you're
you
like,
do realize
are
because
you
you,
serious? Like that's it? That's all you have to say?
it's a huge compliment.
But
You see it.
apparently, yeah.
You're not blown. You work with people every day. You would be amazed at how many people are not even competent. You'd be amazed at how many people cannot consistently show up on time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's at first I started to get frustrated, like, oh, I'm not unique enough for people to say anything different. And it's like, oh no, truly that's like good for this to even exist. And so they must be grateful for that. But yeah, oh my gosh. Oh man. So I know we've talked a lot. I kind of want to pivot a little bit because you brought this up previously on your show. And I know I sent you the questions ahead of time, but I was curious. You have shared a lot on your platforms about your fertility journey and a little bit about how that's affected your family and your decision making process. And we did touch on it earlier when you were talking about, you never thought you'd get married, you never thought you'd even have kids, and now you're like, well, I never thought maybe I would have done IVF, and like you've evolved even further with that particular journey. And I'm just curious if you could share a little bit about that decision to even start the process and then kind of how that evolved and where you're sitting with it now, because I know not everybody decides to even start it, not everybody even decides to follow through, and it doesn't always work. And I know that that can be very heavy, especially for women who so desperately do want to have families. And I'm at an age now where I am starting to see all of my friends either get married or they've been married and now they're having kids. And I still struggle with the decision as well. And I've brought it up on some of my solo episodes where I don't really know where I stand. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But like I don't have the financial space to even start that journey. So I know that it takes a lot of effort and time and consideration. So I'm just curious if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that particular journey and how you've been feeling through it as well. Because I know a lot of women maybe, and men too, or supportive partners, whatever you define as, like
Yeah.
it can affect you and your relationships.
Well, I hated kids until I was 35. I never babysat one child. Never thought they were cute. I was like, "Ugh, they're annoying. I hate them." I would like look at the moms on a flight where they wouldn't shut up. And now I'm that mom. I'm completely
Right.
it's full circle. But once my husband and I got really serious and we married, we were 36 or 37 when we got married. We've been on a pregnancy journey ever since. The first pregnancy we had, we were pregnant 2 weeks after we got married. And at the 12-week mark, when you go in for kind of, especially when you're over 35, they send you to a high risk. The doctor was like, I hate to tell you this, but you're having a partial molar pregnancy and your baby's not going to live. And we
Mm.
were like, we couldn't even believe it. And basically, a partial molar pregnancy is when two sperm fertilize one egg. And so the child gets a duplicate set of chromosomes. Not sustainable with life. Sometimes women do give birth, but the babies are so deformed. And so it was shocking. We were faced with like, are we going to have a medical abortion? Thankfully, because we were, you don't, when you hear that, you almost think too, is it real? Like, are they lying to us? I got a second opinion because I was like, so many thoughts were going through my head. But when I went for the second opinion, there was no heartbeat. So the baby had passed on his own. And so then in a rare instance, I had a DNC procedure. And then sometimes with molar pregnancies, the mole can grow back. It's like a pregnancy cancer. Never even knew this could
Ah,
happen. Happened to me. And I had to do 6 rounds of methotrexate shots, which is basically a form of chemo, but
my
just a shot.
goodness.
It was wild. And then we had to wait 6 months after that. And then we got pregnant with our son. Pregnancy was so easy and great. And I had him when I was 39. And then we've been trying ever since. We've had 2 miscarriages. We started with IVF. There was a bunch of like, they messed up the drug protocol the first time. The second time, they didn't ship our drugs on time. So I really took that as a sign like, this is not meant for us. And so now we're kind of at this space. We're going to probably use an egg donor is our
Mhm.
next step. And we've looked into fostering to adopt, which is a bit of a challenge in the state of California because they do a lot to reintroduce the child to their biological family. So
Oh,
in
really?
this
Okay.
state, yes, very, very hard to. We actually just met with an adoption agency 2 weeks ago, and they are not taking on parents who want to foster to adopt a child under the age of 5 because they have such a long waiting list. So, really, there's a lot of older kids here, which I love. I would love to have an older child, but we have to move. We only have a 2-bedroom apartment. That child has to have their own room.
Their own
There's a
space,
lot of
yeah.
different things, to do. So, I think we're going to move on to an egg donor. It's really hard. I say to women, and I know women of all different phases. Like I know women that have frozen their eggs. They went to unthaw them, and none of them were good. So it's like that's you
That's
think
heartbreaking. Yeah.
heartbreaking. I mean, the only positive to that is the younger you are, the more eggs you're going to get. And I think now they get like 35 eggs. So you have so many chances that, those eggs will work. But I think for women, you know, I hate it because I've realized when I'm older, I'm like, I love being a mother. Like it's my favorite thing. I would love to have like 2 more kids, ideally.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's going to happen because I'm 42 and, to your point, right? All of it costs a lot of money, even an egg donor. So, but I love it. I hate, I'm in this space now. I hear from women all the time that want a child. And the only thing I can say is what I've learned from women of all different ages is you go through this period where you think it's going to be your own egg. You do everything you can. A lot of my friends have good insurance, so they've gone through IVF cycles. The eggs haven't worked. But I think if you can remain open to what family is, everybody that I know that set out to have a child has had one, that wanted one. And like I said, I was a person that thought that kids and a husband would ruin your career, and they've done nothing but add, and in fact, they've been better than the career. It's like
Mhm.
being a mom and having so much fun with my 3-year-old son is way more fulfilling. I mean, it's definitely, my job is definitely fulfilling because I love when I get a message from somebody saying, your episode changed my life. Like, I thought about this differently, or this guest was amazing. But seeing my son like just get so excited and so happy about a train is like, it brings you back to like everything. It's just so amazing. So
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent for women, I think, now, and I'm very grateful. I had an OBGYN that for every single year when I would go in for my checkup, she would say to me, "Okay, you're 30, and every year you wait to have a kid, it could get harder and harder." And I'm so grateful she said that to me, because there is a bit of a misconception for women that, put it off, put it off. And then I hate for women to find themselves in my spot. And a lot of women do now.
Sure.
So I'm a big proponent. I always say, in like, women will message me and they go, "Well, how did you know?" And I always tell women, I went from not having any interest in children to like, I just had this desire. I was like, yeah, you know what? I want to have a kid. Like, I think that would be interesting. It was overnight. And I always
Yeah.
tell women, if you have a curiosity, you'll be a good mother. Because once that baby is here, you're just, it's, I mean, the bond, all the cliches they say are absolutely 100% right. And it's the
Yeah.
best thing. And even just having one child is amazing. It's manageable. Kids are expensive, but like, one kid is fantastic and like so fulfilling. So I always say to women, if you're curious, do it. And I think that women now at ages 19, 20, 21, I think people need to talk to them about, are you, think about this. Like, do you want to do this on your own? And of course, when you're 23, you're like, no, but then when you're
Right.
like 33, 34, 35, you're like, okay, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think it's magical and amazing. And certainly there's a lot of women that don't want to have kids and are thrilled not to. But if you have that like inkling, I think that's when it's for you.
I think that's really good that you and your husband have also kind of worked through it together, and you've been continuing to keep that communication open. And I think on one of your episodes, you kind of talked about how like the two of you both had the same feeling, like this is just in your guts. You're like, this isn't whatever's going on with this process. It's not that it should be an easy process, but for whatever reason, this is exponentially harder than normal. Like this just doesn't feel right, and maybe we come back to it later or we find a different doctor and program or something. But like, I thought that was really great when I watched that show, or at least that segment of the show, that you two both could be in agreement and like support each other through that decision. And it wasn't like just you saying, no, we're going to keep going forward, and him being like, absolutely not. Or him saying, yes, keep going. And you're like, no, my body can't handle it. And like, I think that was good that you could show your audience that this is the reality of this decision making. Like this is a heavy topic. It's a heavy consideration, and you shouldn't do it lightly. So I was fascinated by that, and I just really appreciated the willingness to even share that kind of thing, because that's still so hard for so many women, no matter what age, to even want to talk about that particular aspect of being a woman and becoming a mom. And I can see that it definitely benefits my friends that do have children. Like, excuse me, they're wonderful at it, and their kids are super sweet and cool, and it's fun to be an auntie, just to go over
Yeah.
and hang out and see them interact and everything. And I'm excited for my brother and his fiance. Hopefully they can make that come to fruition for themselves, because I know that that's something they want to do as well. But
Yes.
it'll be cool. It's interesting, and it's a tough path, and it's not for everyone. But I just thought that was really cool that you were willing to share that story and your
Yeah.
feelings about it, your honest feelings.
Yeah, and I think I'm so glad we're in a space where women talk about it so much. And I think now the next thing that people are talking about is how our environment, is impacting fertility, because a lot of
Absolutely.
young women are starting the journey and can't have a child. And your probability of getting pregnant under the age of 39 is pretty good. It's really, 39 is really like a big cutoff. But even still, I mean, women in their 20s and 30s are having such fertility struggles. And I think the next big conversation is like, what is it in our environment? And it sounds like it's a combination of things, but are the air we are in breathing, and the
The
water,
air, the food, your fitness
plastic, the
levels.
food, yes. And
Oh, definitely
even
the plastics. Absolutely the plastics. My mom, I think
Yes.
that's one reason why she doesn't want to come on my show is because she doesn't want to like come off as like a conspiracy theorist or anything. But like she is super into like anti-cancerous causing plastics, and like she's changed our whole household into recycling and going anti-plastic and trying to come up with the most green ways to live. And like going into her home, it seems so immaculate compared to mine because she knows everything and she's aware of like, well, this part's bad for you and this ingredient's bad. So I switched it out for this kind of soap and this kind of laundry detergent and this kind of cleaner and this kind of food containers. And she's got it on lock. Like if anybody's going to save the world, it might be Leslie Bowers, but
Leslie needs
plastics.
to come on. Not we're all
Yeah.
conspiracy theorists now. We are
Yeah.
because
No,
we're not wrong anymore. I mean, I
no.
think 2 decades ago, we used to think, okay, well, this is maybe crazy. But now, I mean, I just had a naturopathic doctor on talking about fertility. And one of the biggest things she says for women that interrupts hormones is now they're looking at fragrances. All of us, how many for
Mm.
years we've all bought Bath and Body Works, Tom
Or,
Ford
yeah,
fragrances,
the Chanel's and stuff. Yeah.
all this stuff that we're constantly breathing. Then we wash our clothes in it. Then we wash our hands in it. Then you put your hair,
Yeah.
you know, to
The
think
product.
that that doesn't have an impact when you do it every single day, like so many of
Yeah.
us do, right? Women, it has a huge impact on your body. Your skin's your biggest organ. So
Yeah. It
Leslie
absorbs
Power
everything.
is onto it. It's really, and unfortunately, women, we're all beginning to pay the price. And that's the scary part, I think. No, I think people have to, we're going to all become super aware. And I don't know. Can we reverse things like in our water? Can we reverse like the air stuff? So much of that is like, big government. But
Yeah.
I,
Well,
what
yes.
can we
That,
do? Yeah.
yeah. That's the tough thing there. The government does have its hand in a lot of local control in that way. And you got to change the laws. And in order to change the laws, you got to change the people that are in power. And you can't change the people that are in power unless you vote. And it's just a vicious cycle. So
No,
that's a whole separate episode in and of itself, I think.
come back.
Yeah. Oh, please
But
do.
I'm
Yeah.
no,
I tell every guest.
you're gonna kill me because
No, no, no.
I have to love you and leave you because I can't believe we've been talking for over an hour. No, I have an appointment at 11. Like I just, just texted the guy. I'm like, oh wait a minute, we're still talking.
Oh,
So
no.
I
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
you. But no, I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm so excited to promote your podcast and talk about you.
You're
And
so sweet. Thank you.
I love that
Yeah.
you
No.
blog.
My one final question then, since you do have to go, what would be your advice for anybody who might be feeling lost or at a crossroads in their life? They're maybe going through a pretty dark transition and they don't really know what to do or how to find their purpose again. What would be your advice to that particular person? And then we can close out.
So easy. Try a bunch of things. And I'm an example of that. When I started my podcast, it was 8 different things. It was, I mean, I started out before Joe Rogan. I started out as the female Joe Rogan. I would broadcast at mosques and I would find out about the Muslim life. And then I would have on nudists. And then, I mean, I have done so many iterations. And, we have this, I think, thing that, you have to have a specialty and you have to know what you're doing. I can tell you right now, I make a very good living. And the Sarah Fraser show, honey, you tune in, you don't know what you're getting from one day to the other. The only thing that's very consistent is I try to have unique guests on that are of interest. And I do a lot of sister wives because I have found, again, I stumbled upon that 2 years ago. Like I randomly came across this show. People talked about it. I watched it. I did a podcast episode. It was one of my highest rated. And I'm like, I'm onto something. And I leaned into that. And to this day, I should just do sister wives coverage 24/7. People
There you
love
go.
it. So try things, I think. And there's this pressure too to like have it all figured out by the time you're 29. It's like so many people I know in my own family have made it, have found businesses, become entrepreneurs in their 50s and then became millionaires. Like it just, try things. Go and try things and get quiet and in taking a walk without music on and just what piques your interest. Like what comes into your subconscious? It's like, oh, I've always wanted to try, surfing. Your intuition's always giving you clues. Go and do that. Doesn't mean you're going to leave your life and be a surfer, but maybe that leads you to somebody who's in the surf class with you that owns a company that is looking for someone that you have the expertise in.
Sure.
There's just, I see it all the time. And Hollywood's such a great example. People's lives change here on a dime. Like they have nothing and they book a job the next day. So I know people have all kinds of different mental health things, but I think if you can just wake up, just, spend some time in silence, think about it and try some different things before you know it, a break will come and it will change the trajectory of your career or your life like in a minute.
That's fabulous. And that's wonderful advice. So Sarah, let's close out. So I know you got to head to your next activity for the day, but
Yep.
yeah, no, it's all good. How can people find you if they want to interact with your content or work with you? What's the best way to do that?
Always. The Sarah Fraser Show, everywhere you get your podcast. I drop an episode daily, so you can always have something there. TikTok, I love at the Sarah Fraser Show. And you can just find updates anywhere. TheSarahFraserShow.com. Like I told you, I'm going to do a growth and monetization course for podcasters. That's going to be dropping this summer, and even a basically podcasting 101. Most of it you can find on the internet, but people have come to me over the years and said, well, I want to know what you do. So I am doing a very affordable, like step 1, step 2, step 3. This is how you can launch your podcast. This is the platform you should distribute it on. This is how many commercials you should add. This is how you get them. This is exactly what I did. So look for that. And I'm going to start doing an email sign up for people that are curious about it soon. So that will be everywhere, thesarahfrasershow.com and more.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And everybody, same thing for me. You know how to find me. All of the contact info for Sarah and myself will be in the description of the show notes. You can find me at askwhatnowpodcast@gmail.com. I'm amanda.k.powers on Instagram, and everywhere else is all Podcast for the Lost. And remember, wanderers are always welcome.